My name's Casey Watkins. I'm with Sith Marketing. We have my wonderful co-host over there.
I'm wonderful now, man. I'll
Uh,
take that. I'm sorry.
right now,
So,
right now you
that's
are.
what you say on camera.
Yeah.
Kevin Adams, Predictive Online Marketing. Longtime friend Craig Andrews, CEO of Allies for Me. And take it away, Craig.
Yeah, so my name's Craig Andrews, is Kevin Sam with Allies for Me. And, I guess if I had an intro for myself, I'm one of those people that eventually find the right answer because I systematically eliminate all the wrong ways of doing them by trying it. And one of the things I used to struggle a lot with was sales. And I'd see these naturally talented people who could just sell like nothing else. I was like, how do they do it? And the fact is, I can't do it their way, even if I tried. But the really cool thing is, I think the way I describe it is, I don't really sell. I just create an environment where people want to buy.
I like that.
Like that.
So, all right, I'm gonna jump in. You want to, so your engineering sales. We were in semiconductor industry. So I'm talking off the conversation before. What gets you out of semiconductor industry and going into marketing?
Well, it's funny. I was in market. I actually did marketing when I was in the semiconductor world. I had this idea that, if I become an engineer, I'm going to be able to be creative and build all these really cool things. And I came out of college and actually had what many would consider a really choice engineering job. I was a design engineer. Most engineers are not design engineers. They're usually in some type of support function. Not only was I a design engineer, but I was designing cell phones in the early days of cell phones back in the 90s. And I always had a drawer full of phones when people were excited to get their first phone. But what I discovered was there wasn't a lot of opportunity to be creative. It's not that type of environment. And so I decided to move from that side of tech to the marketing side of tech, and joined a semiconductor company that provided parts for cell phones. And so for about a decade, I marketed chips to people who built cell phones and drove about $1 billion revenue doing that.
And so you got out of that completely and just stayed in marketing. Was it just like I'm done with this, or?
No, it's a good question. It was a hard life. And before I went to work for a semiconductor company, no kidding, about a year or two before I joined a semiconductor company, I told somebody, I said, I will never work for a semiconductor company. And they said, why? I said, they work too hard. I watch them work, and these guys work really hard. And I ended up joining one. It was hard work, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. And they took good care of us. I mean, I was going over to Asia 4 or 5 times a year. And you fly in nice parts of the airplane, you stay in nice hotels, you eat nice food, they take good care of you. And what happens with many markets as they become mature, the profit margin starts going away and away and away. And it's not long before they start looking at the employees and saying, hey, you know what? We don't think we're going to fly you in the front of the plane. We think we're going to fly you in the back of the plane. And if we could fly you on the wing, figure out a way to fly you on the wing, we would do that. And so I saw that trend coming years before it happened. And I always said, the day they make me fly coach to Asia, I'm done. And sure enough, that time came. And so I went ahead and left and thought, I'll do some type of marketing consultancy, and started bumping around doing something. And, initially just kind of staggered into the world of SEO, very, very unintentionally. And then once I got into SEO, I was looking at it and I thought, for SEO, you're paid to drive traffic, but I bet they want the traffic to do something once they get there. So I started looking at conversion optimization, because I thought, Google always said, put the best page on the internet and we'll rank it. And I thought, well, how do you measure that? And the only way I could think of measuring that was by conversion rates. So I started doing that. And then it hit me. I was like, okay, people probably like the leads that come from conversions, but probably what they like more is having customers convert from those leads. And so with enough time, as I kept looking at it, I wanted to get away from, hey, we're about driving traffic, to we're about growing your business. And so where we are right now is, um, from start to finish, even past, our scope goes even past somebody becoming a customer, because we believe, especially the first few moments after they make that commitment, those are critical few moments that if you do a few things uniquely, it really cements that bond, and it makes when somebody sees how you behave after they have your money, all of a sudden that's the thing that starts driving rave reviews. And so we focus on the process all the way up to being a customer and then even afterwards.
Yeah, I love that. Like the ethical marketing, there's a lot of marketing that like, oh, marketers, they ruin everything. Let me do. But worrying about like, how, am I actually taking care of my customers? You don't see that on the back end. That's a process of like teaching ourselves, like letting our, like trying to make more money, and then realizing, or trying to make a client make more money, and then sometimes like creating a bad experience, and then like, shit, how would I feel?
Yeah.
um, uh,
Yeah. Even like for me, my follow up after the sales, just setting up like a report for the marketing that they get on a monthly basis. Most of them are ecstatic just for that because they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So it, it's it's weird that how much the small things, being attentive to small things, matter to customers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. When we first talk to somebody, we lay out in our very first conversation with the prospect, we lay out, the framework we use. And it's funny when people going through that start realizing, hey, wait a minute, this is what you just talked about. You're doing what you just said. And I said, if I didn't do that, you should probably run for the hills.
yeah.
We practice what we preach because we believe it feels good, and hopefully when you get to experience how it feels when we treat you this way, hopefully that motivates you to treat your customers the same way.
Yep.
And you talk about first time offers all the time. This like, and the techniques, and the connections that you like make on those like, those get me, and I'm like, why didn't, oh, of course. Yeah, talk more about those.
Yeah, so let me back up just a step and kind of give a high level of the framework so you can kind of think through this. So we see it as like we call it the relationship model. You have an introduction, and then you have conversation. If the conversation goes well, you don't jump to marriage, right? You usually have a coffee date. And that's our first time offer, is that coffee date. And then if coffee goes well, then you have a dinner date. And then if that goes well, then you finally have commitment. And then there's again that step after commitment that matters as well. But so if you think about a coffee date, and I don't want to pretend to get in the heads of women, but when I listen to them, I hear them, I hear stories about how they're meeting somebody for coffee, and they have their girlfriend sitting in a car around the corner, 5 minutes away, texting them saying, hey, do you need a rescue? Because it's they're like, he looks okay, but I'm not sure. And if you're in the business of selling, certainly, consulting services like we do, I mean, people are making a big commitment. It's scary, and they don't know you. And so we put together this thing called a first time offer that we just price stupidly cheap. We price it so cheap that anybody who is reasonably considering doing what we help them do, when they see it, they say yes. And about half the people that we make that offer to say yes, and about half say no. And we celebrate both because we want that to, kind of operate as a filter. If we can't help somebody, or for whatever reason there's a mismatch, we'd rather find out early. that's the purpose of the coffee date. And but then the process of doing that, just like a coffee date, they get to figure out if we want to go further with them, or they get to figure out if they want to go further with us, and we get to figure out if we want to go further with them. Because one of the worst things I could imagine would be getting locked into like some long commitment, and like a month or two in, you figure out you hate each other.
Describing me and Kevin's relationship.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're locked into this. Great. Here we go. Yeah, no, I mean, I love that. Like, I mean, it's one thing, like, hey, there's a honeymoon phase, but there's just a regular time. You got to know that you can talk to that person and put up with Casey. I mean, the person, right?
Yeah.
I mean that, and I get that. I've worked on stuff, and the deal sounded great, and suddenly we're locked in, and my way of doing things is absolutely not the way they want to do it, and and I can already feel there's going to be tension, and that's, I mean, you got to get through the workday, right? You got to, like, you got to find the stuff you enjoy about work, and when things get in your head, and that can be on both sides. That's the worst thing. It's expensive for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing we want to do, and we try to figure out during that time if we can actually help them. Because, for me, one of the biggest sins I could commit is to actually take somebody's money and not change their business.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and you have I see you gave a gift. If anybody wants to try this out.
Yeah, I haven't updated the YouTube video, but I posted it in the links I shared. As soon as this video is over, I'll update the links.
Cool. That'll go out in the description. All right.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know what it is, we're talking about first time offer. So we have and let me back up. When I first started working on this, again, as I said earlier, we figure out how to do things right by finding all the wrong ways to do it first. It's kind of like Thomas Edison said. Somebody asked Edison, they said, "Have you figured out how to make a light bulb?" And he said, "No, but I figured out 1,000 ways not to make one." And and so unfortunately, that ends up being my process in so many things. And when I first started going down this concept, I had the broad sense of how it would work. And now this is dating myself a little bit, but there used to be this place called Columbia House Records. And for 1 penny, you could get 13 albums. And then it became 13 CDs. But that was kind of a very, very simple version of a first time offer where, if you're in the business, if you're trying to build your music collection, certainly you would pay 1 penny, to buy all, the 13 albums. And then once you experience what it's like working with Columbia House Records, then you hopefully would stay as a member and they would make money off you over the long run. And so I tried, and unfortunately, especially for a complex product or service, a model that simple doesn't work well. And I made a bunch of mistakes, unbelievable mistakes looking at it in hindsight. But it took me about 18 months to finally figure it out and get it to start working. And then we perfected it over time since then. So in terms of the two gifts, one is kind of a worksheet that if you want, or a guide that if you want to do this, here's how to avoid most of the mistakes that I made in the process of doing it. And then the other gift is we actually have a course on our website where you can come in and take the course. It's a 10-day course where at the end of that, you actually have put together a first time offer. And we'll give 23 days of access for that. Now, part of the reason we put a cap on that is, I'm like you guys, I've signed up for free gifts, free courses before, and never showed up and did the coursework. And my goal is to actually see businesses changed. And so I know if we put a little bit of scarcity that you have this, you have it for 23 days. that the probability that you'll do something with it is higher if we put those bounds on that. And so that's the reason for that.
Yeah, I love the thinking that you put into these things. Like this is, okay, this is what you'd think is happening, but we're humans. We're all doing, and you talk about like going through the mistakes. I think that's how we get to know what we're doing. It's because we know everything that not to do. Um,
So what kind of first time offers do you normally try to set up for people? I mean, I for like a plumber, I'm kind of seeing that being a little difficult, but I'm assuming there's some good businesses it works for, and then there's some others that
Yeah.
not
Well,
so much.
well, no, here, let me give some examples actually from the home service market. So there's a roofing company in Austin that if you lost, if you had a storm come through and you lost some shingles off your roof, they would come out and they would replace up to, I think it was like up to 6 shingles for $75. So they would
Oh
come out,
wow!
climb on your roof, replace the shingles, $75, you're back in business. And all they were doing was building a pipeline of business by doing that, because someday you're going to need a whole new roof. And guess who has the relationship? Guess who has the trust? And so we had a really nasty hailstorm a number of years ago, and sure enough, guess who I called right away? Unfortunately, a lot of other people had hail damage, and they're like, "Wow, we really wish we could get to you, but we can't." And so they ended up, but they were the very first ones that I called when I needed them. I've heard of in the plumbing business, so a number of years ago they changed the size of water heater that you could sell. And if you're like me, and for some strange reason they put the water heaters in the attic, you have to get this thing through the opening to get up in the attic. And so one of the things that I heard offered was, hey, for $50 or something, we'll come out and we'll look at your water heater and just let you know where, basically come in and add some value that's disproportionately high to the services that you receive. There's another company called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So real familiar with them. I know the guy that writes the ads that you hear, and they had early on they were trying to figure out how to price things, and they said, you know what, people don't want to think about this. Why don't you price it? We'll pick up any old TV for $25. And this was before the days of flat screens. This is when you might hurt your back getting
Oh
that
yeah,
TV out of there.
monstrosities.
Yeah. And so at $25, they would lose money picking up the TV. But usually what happened is while you were there, the drivers were trained to say, hey, while we're here, is there anything else you want picked up? And sure enough, there was. And then that's how they made the money. So
Wow.
there's 3 different examples. Now, those are fairly simple. Usually when we're putting together a first time offer, it has 3 to 5 milestones, 3 to 5 deliverables. But usually we're working with products or services that are a little bit more complex than when you got junk.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
the TV. Yeah, I mean, the moment someone's there, like, do you have anything else? Well, of course I do. I've got other stuff. I just haven't dumped it off. I was calling you about the one that was top of mind. Yeah, and I would have too much fun with a plumbing kind of like first time offers for number 2 problems. I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, people will remember it. There's the guy who writes the ads for 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he just picked up a HVAC, plumbing, and electrical company in Detroit, and it's run by a lady. And so the whole campaign he's running, if it's her saying, if you need a guy, I'm your guy. And
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's some other things that's, I've probably said too much already, but he's doing some other things that are really clever in that campaign.
I mean, you can't just redo that same. Yeah, I guess you could clone it in different markets, but so do you? Those are like a hook, right? What would you like for if you? I don't know. You've probably given some ideas. Just so like you're talking about like so if it's just a simple business, they're going to have some bigger problem down the road. They probably got a small one. You would throw out like a loss leader, we'd call it, right?
Right.
Um, and okay, so that's our relationship, and now it's just a waiting thing. I'm throwing out like opportunities, and I'm not making much off of most of those, but they're going to start coming back, and that's the most simple type. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's a tough thing if you're in the roofing business or if you're in the HVAC business. Most days of the year, people, or plumbing business, most days of the year, people don't need your services. And so the marketing challenge there is, you know, on that one odd day that they need you, you wouldn't be top of mind.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge with that. But um, for instance, when somebody comes to us and needs help with marketing, the reality is people need help with marketing all the time. It's not something where we have to wait for a roof to, we have to wait 20 years for a roof to fail. But um, when somebody's coming to you in shopping mode, so maybe that's one way of differentiating it is if you're in a business that they need you infrequently and you want to be top of mind when they do need you, you just need a strategy to get there. And some of that would be, with that roofing company that would come and replace shingles for $75. That was great. That was a great way of doing that. It kept them top of mind. I have a little binder that I keep at my house that I call the house binder. It has all the contractors we use. And so, anytime we have a need, we just pull out the binder. All right, we call them. But for other businesses, if somebody's coming to you, somebody realizes they need some help with marketing and they come to us, what we do, our first time offer is we have we have 5 deliverables, and we say it should be 3, no less than 3, no more than 5 deliverables. And we just kind of lay out those 5 deliverables and think of those deliverables as milestones. So if they're standing here, they know they want to be way over here. And what we do is we help them get partway on that path and partway down that path with what we're delivering. And so so it takes a lot of the risk out for them because they say, they can say, well, it's not much money. And if we don't move forward with this guy, we at least are closer to our goal than we were before we engaged with them. And so that's, when you're dealing with more complex offers and you have somebody come to you, that's those work really well. As a matter of fact, we've had people, doing the standard deal shopping for agencies where they decide they're going to talk to 3 different agencies. We're on the list. And, and we've had people actually cancel calls with the other agencies once we present the first time offer, which is amazing. So anybody that's ever put out a proposal and, waited those dreaded days, to see if the proposal comes back, we don't live that way.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've had those. So yeah, I mean, because I completely get it. You've got the if someone's going to go with like a marketing agency, they're going to be putting in not only an investment of capital into that, but it's an opportunity cost. If they guess wrong, they miss a growth opportunity. That can be 6 months of like we're just going sideways this whole time, and maybe they're just break even and not losing, but it's like um, so it's a lot of like it makes you risk averse. It's like I have to make a decision, but it's all like they're all talking like half the people are talking a lingo that I don't quite get. Um, and so you're like, hey, just try this out, just see, and if it doesn't work, good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah.
our fifth deliverable is actually a 90-day execution plan, so that so that they know when they're done, when we're done with this little period, and they get it. And actually, hang on, let me grab something. So here's what they get.
Sorry, I was filling time.
Sorry about that. Sorry to leave. Sorry for the dead air. Um,
You forced the audience to see this.
Yeah, force him to be like, oh, he's dancing now.
This is extortion.
so this is a binder that just shipped out recently, and
Yeah.
when you open it up, you have, we outline the framework that we're doing. We start having, here's a section that's on messaging. On this is a self-assessment we had them do, where they answer a few questions on our website. And we came back and said, hey, you know what? Here's clients that you work uniquely well with. And here's what makes those clients tick.
Oh.
And then we did a gap analysis to figure out what was missing. And then we have a content plan for 6-month content plan. Here's the content you should develop over the next 6 months. And then here's an execution plan. They actually have a marketing plan. When they finish this mini project, they have a 90-day execution plan so that they know what to do over the next 90 days. And we tell them very explicitly that you can take this plan, you can execute it yourself, or you can take it to someone else and have them execute it for you. Or if we mutually agree, we'll help you execute it. So, I mean, this is something they're walking away with. They're actually walking away with a marketing plan in a nice binder that they can go run their business with. And if they
That is empowering a person. I mean, I've seen a lot of times, like, someone walks away like, I like this, what like, plenty of marketers, really great at what they do, walk away and go, what they're doing is fantastic, but I have no idea what I, it's not just the intricacies that they're like, I just don't get in general what's going on. So they have, if they leave that partnership, they have nothing to take away from it. This is like, hey, I've got a broad scope. Like, this is actionable. The details, sure, I mean, to get people to to get into that, but that is empowerment. I like that. Love that.
Yeah. And guess what? If they decide they don't like us, that's okay. They now know how to interview their next agency.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that didn't like you. That's but as I get it on the business level. Like, yeah, sometimes that um he are you okay with sharing, like, the last year? Are you
Sure.
okay? Oh man, that's a powerful story. Um,
Yeah. So this time last year, I was horizontal, and my wife was meeting with hospice, and the doctors were telling her I wasn't going to make it, and it was funny. She would see something, she's like, "Hey, this is a positive sign, right?" And the doc's like, "No, he's still going to die." And another thing would happen. She's like, "Well, this is a positive sign." The docs are like, "No, he's going to die." And eventually I didn't die. And she's like, "Hey, this is a positive sign, right?" And doc said, "He's not going to be right in the head." She's like, "Oh, that's normal." So,
that's a keeper.
the journey returning to abnormal has been fairly short. And but so I had a really bad case of COVID. I had double pneumonia. I was in the hospital for 3 months, and on the ventilator for 25 days. And in the course of 5 weeks, I lost 40 pounds. And yeah, part of that was they were malnourishing me. Don't know how that happened. But anyway, when I woke up, I could lift a finger, but I couldn't lift an arm and I couldn't lift my legs. And so basically, since October, I've been learning how to walk again. I've been um, learning, rebuilding coordination and balance and lung capacity. If you've been listening closely, like right there, you probably hear me pause and take a breath because even sitting here, I don't have the lung capacity I used to have. And so I have to sometimes pause while I'm talking and take in some oxygen. But it's been it's certainly not the path I would have chosen, but there have been many good things that have come from this. Relationship with my wife has just really come together in a strong way that's hard to describe. As a matter of fact, this is kind of funny. So when they do that to you, they put you on some serious drugs, and one of my first memories of her, I'm sitting in bed and I'm looking up and everything's a little bit hazy, and I'm listening to her talk, and to me she sounds completely manic, and she has like some weird camouflage on her head, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, she kind of lost it since I've been checked out, but that's okay. That's what we have. That's what we'll work with. And turns out that was a hallucination. And, and I had a few of those. But no, that's been really wonderful. How it's brought my wife and I closer together. It's frustrating at times. I walk upstairs and I'm huffing and puffing by the time I get to the top. But it's been a really neat time. I had clients visit me when I was in the hospital. One client, I was telling him, I said, my goal is to be back at work by January 1st. And he said, look, take as much time as you need. We'll be here waiting for you. We're not hiring someone else. And just so you know, my expectation was that we weren't expecting to see you until second quarter. And it was really, it was neat. It was heartening to see that, I don't know. It's good to know that you made an impact.
Yeah, I mean, like it's one thing to get, like as a business relationship, but on that kind of connecting, that's huge. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
man, that is.
So my questions would be, okay. I'm a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to word this without getting all teary-eyed. I know there's going to be a day when I have health issues that may or may not end my existence of being here. I have, as I'm looking over at her, a lovely wife that would still like to have, well, besides my company, finances, because I'm assuming this is probably a horrible assumption, but I'm assuming with you owning your own business, you kind of make the majority of the money, or does your wife work?
No, yeah, no, I make, definitely the majority provider. And by the way, the month before I went in the hospital, I switched from QuickBooks Desktop, where I was the only one that knew the way into QuickBooks, to QuickBooks Online, where I had somebody who could actually tell my wife while I was checked out how much money we had, and make sure my employees got paid, make sure vendors got paid, and make sure my wife got paid. And that's one of the bizarre things. If I had gone in the hospital a month earlier, she would have been in complete darkness where we were financially from a business standpoint.
Wow, that
Wow.
timing flip.
Yeah. So have you made like adjustments personally and businessly? Wow, because I'm sitting here drinking water, not wine like you, and I can't
Is
even
that a
talk.
plug-in for Chrome or something? Businessly?
Have you made adjustments for that?
A little bit. I haven't done as much as I should. There are a couple things that I intended to do that would that would make a that would make it easier, take a little bit of the guesswork out of things. Basically um, a hidden key that kind of unlocks a number of things. Now I thought I'd had that in place. I did, but somebody forgot that they had the key,
Oh,
and um, but that's so what that teaches me is the method I had was not robust enough, and so I have to strengthen that a little bit.
okay.
Uh, and by the way, before I forget, one thing that when I woke up and my wife started telling me what had been going on, it um, if I had enough strength, I'm sure it would have moved me to tears. I didn't have enough strength at the time, but she told me how people like Kevin and Libby and others had just kind of stepped in and kept everything running while I was checked out. And um, that was amazing. That was absolutely amazing to hear that um, things kept running even when I was gone.
Man, I was talking. Livy was really like she was trying to hold it together, but she was really in there as a champ. I didn't talk to anyone else on it, but yeah, that moment there wasn't a question on that. But we both agreed um, that if there was a chance, you were Craig was going to be back. There wasn't a question. If there was a chance, you were coming out of it, and and yeah, I don't know. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so glad you came back and made it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, Dan, that
Hmm.
yeah, sorry. Phew,
Yeah.
that wasn't good. The shit. Um, um, yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
a tough time, and the yeah, it was amazing how people stepped up. I think that's a lesson from that time. You know, um, Everybody stepped up in ways that were amazing. My wife. If you talk to anybody that followed her blog and looked at what she walked through, they're just amazed at what she did. And I had somebody recently tell me, they said, I could never do that. I'm not that strong. And I suspect I suspect they could. And that's the thing, you don't know until you're in that situation. And when that's your when that's your only choice, you figure it out.
yeah, and the um, man, um, the so I think there's something like you had an opportunity in that to take a step back from marketing and come back at it, right, and just look at everything that you had been doing, and now you had a, probably you had to have a completely different vantage point and looking and going, was it a feeling of I'm relearning what I like? How much of it was relearning what you were doing, and then looking at it and going, how much of it was why was I doing this part, or
No,
why was I doing that?
yeah, no, that's a good question. In terms of the general nature and the strategy of what we're doing, I don't think that's changed that much. Um, the um, but if there was anything, I mean, if there was ever a clear lesson from this time from a business standpoint, it's the importance of building teams of people. You know, because if your business is dependent upon one person, that's not good. And you know, if anything, it just really emphasized the importance of building teams of people, giving them opportunities to excel, and um, and building the capability of as many people as possible. You know, and um, that would be, I think that would be kind of the big lesson, and just kind of reinforce that. And you know, and coming back was hard. I mean, Kevin, you may remember, uh, you know, you and I talked in December, and you were talking about putting together a landing page. And I asked, I said, would you like help, you know, writing the copy? And what I was looking for was an opportunity to kind of put my foot back in the water and and get back into the game. And you know, normally it might take me 45 minutes or an hour to write, you know, copy for a landing page. That copy took me 5 hours to write. You know, and it was just, you know, there was, you know, I was still coming back online, but at that time, reading was really hard, writing was hard. It was just, you know, there were some, you know, and I don't know if I fully understand why. You know, you could talk about how physically, you know, my muscles had atrophied, but it was almost like my brain had atrophied as well. And you know, fortunately, I've gotten past that. But the but yeah, I'll never forget that 5 hours to write copy for a, yeah, fairly simple landing page, and it was hard. I mean, I just kept going back to it and going back to it. It was just hard.
I had hacked away at that a few times, and I kept and I had spent more time thinking about how am I going to write this, and then I'd come back to it, I'd stare at it and work on it. So cranking it out in 5 hours is a heck of a lot faster than anything I was doing with that. What you were writing on, that was like it was one of those like uh, it's not something people really put a lot of time into thinking. About the need at the time. It was rearranging your office to be more efficient, and having the office planning done, and like uh, yeah. So 5 hours, man. You got me beat. um the the I remember I was 16, run over by a jeep. um Luckily, it was a Jeep, so the undercarriage is like high enough that I could just get caught and drug, for 45 feet. But so some terrible road rash, but not like crushing or anything, except for the impact. But concussion. Think I got all my senses back. No, um, but I still I remember it took me probably 2 weeks to fully be able to use my legs. And it was now I get out of the hospital bed. My legs weren't actually impacted; they weren't hurt, but they couldn't. I couldn't. I had to step just baby steps, and I could not do full outreach with them, like extend them fully. And I used to love to go on walks, and I just suddenly couldn't do that. But so um, I know there's doctor could tell us all kinds of stuff about like what had happened in that moment, but I do know that like what we're doing right here, sitting in offices, working at computers, this is not this is not the healthy way to do things, right? We're not actually getting our blood pumping, we're not getting the oxygen to our brain very well. I'd say I, I wouldn't ask this on anyone like that, the experience you went through, but I think the practices you're going through to get that recovery is something we should all probably be doing a lot more of. Um, Getting
Yeah.
out, going on, just stepping away from the computer. You
Yeah.
Um,
So
um,
I have two follow up questions. First would be, if I can ask, how many do you have on your team, and how did you go about building that out?
Yeah. So what's the count? So I mean, we're primarily, we have W-2s and we have 1099s, and if we do all in, I would say it's which is 7, I think, and so some of it's just been built out over time. We've had very little attrition, and I mean, let me say this about Kevin. This is a story my wife's heard many times. I met Kevin at PubCon in Vegas years ago,
I'm
and
so sorry.
but here's the thing that was so remarkable. I was in a session one year, and I asked a question, and then I went back 1 year later, and I saw him again, and Kevin came up to me and said, "Hey, how did it work out about regarding blah 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 blah?" And it was exactly what I'd asked him a year earlier about, and that just really stood out. And I was like, at some point we have to figure out how to work together. This is the type of person I want to work with.
Yep.
And
day parting on call extensions.
yeah,
Like,
he still remembers.
Yeah.
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 That's why him and I are such good friends, because if I forget something, I can call him and he will gladly remind me of what it was.
Yes. So there's somebody working for me now, W-2. Her name's Elena. And Elena was my first W-2 that I hired. I remember seeing her resume, and I thought, if this is who I think this is, I've definitely got to hire her. And so I met her, and I was like, yeah, that's who I think it is. And fairly common thing, especially, fairly common. If I have somebody working directly with me, I have them have lunch with my wife, and my wife does sort of an interview with them. And and Karen, my wife, and Elena just finished lunch, and I get a text from Karen, and she says, "Elena's coming to Starbucks to meet you. Give her a job." And
Wow.
and so the thing that stood out about Elena, she grew up in St. Petersburg, Russia, and she moved to California when she was 13. And as you can imagine, that's probably not the best time for a young lady to have their life, kind of upset. And what I saw in Elena is she has a history of being thrown into unfamiliar circumstances and finding her way through. That's a skill I can't teach. There's a lot of other things I can teach, but I can't teach that. And that's exactly who she is. And so she worked for me for a number of years. And then she resigned. She gave me 3 months notice. And that's when I hired Libby. And Libby helped Elena helped train Libby. And then Libby worked for me for 5 years. And she had some life circumstances that made sense for her to move on this past February. It was a huge loss. And so I was like, okay, what do we do? And I reached out to Elena. Now, here's the funny thing. Back in October, when I'm sitting in the hospital, by the way, I couldn't type. I couldn't type on a computer because my hands were just like this. And that's where I learned with the iPhone, if you double tap the space key, it will put a period in and move a space. I discovered that just because every time I hit the darn keyboard, I hit it like 2 or 3 times. And but I got an email from somebody who was trying to give Elena, who was interviewing, and Elena had listed me as a reference. So I gave Elena a reference for a job in October, not knowing that Libby would be moving on a number of months later. And then I reached out to Elena after Libby resigned, and Elena, initially she's like, well, I just started this job. And then she came back like a day or two later. She's like, hey, let's talk more. And so Elena's back, and which is awesome. So A lot of it is, so there's a graphic designer and a web developer that I work with exclusively. So we don't do, we're more if somebody needs a website, we architect the kind of the structure of it, not from a technical nature, but more from how's the user going to come in and experience it, and how do we structure it to have the shortest path to answer their questions, and we have graphic designer and web developer that we've been working with for years. And it was just years ago I started looking around, tried a few others, and when I found somebody who was good and who I felt like we had a good relation, good match, good personality match. It was really just investing in the relationship. And I mean, one time I was out in South Carolina visiting family, and the developer lived a couple hours away, and so I drove just to go buy him lunch and kind of build that relationship over time. And the I don't know, I guess I would say it's just about finding the right people, finding good people, and building relationships. And that's kind of been my strategy.
Yeah, it's harder to, it's like, it's one thing to okay, I'm like managing an account, supposed to be responsible, but it's another thing when there's a person that you're like, that and you talk to regularly and you've got a connection with. Like, letting that person down is like, it's palpable. It's like, oh, no, 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 this is not happening, and
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
So my
the
second question goes back before all this stuff. So I'm assuming you're. See, I hate saying that. Let's rephrase that. So no, I'm going to still start with I'm assuming, because that's what it's going to be. I'm assuming that your one time or your first initial offer is like a percentage of your overall what you're trying to sell them. So if you're trying to sell them like $100 product, then you're just trying to get them in like a $7 product. But if you're selling them like a $5,000 or $10,000 product, you're not really wanting to do a $7 product. You'd want to do like a $100 product, or is it?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's like a sliding scale somehow.
It's sort of. So the way we describe it, so first time offer has a few traits. One, it has to be an exchange of time or money. We always prefer that it's an exchange of money. There's about half a dozen psychological reasons why, and a couple practical reasons why. And it has to be an irresistible offer. And some of the things that make it, and it has to be an impulse purchase. So this is addressing that. So as an impulse purchase, we mean the coins in the cushion of the couch, or the money in your wallet, or the B2B equivalent of that. So let me come at it from another side. It can't be a budgetary item. It can't be a discretionary purchase. It has to be an impulse purchase. And so another way that I like to put it, and just wrap a hard number around it, if it's B2B, we usually try to keep it below $500. And the reason for that is when somebody's debating making this purchase, we want it to be an amount of money that a broad number of people have approval to spend, so they don't need to go ask somebody if they can spend the money. And then even more importantly, we want it to be an amount of money that if it's completely wasted, nobody's ever going to hold them accountable for how that money is spent.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like that.
So you think about it, somebody says, hey, I want to spend $5,000 on this. I mean, it may be great. It may make the business, that $5,000 expenditure may make the business $100,000. And if it does, they'll be a hero. But they always live in fear of, what if it doesn't? If I get this $5,000, somebody's going to hold me accountable for how it's spent and hold me accountable for the results. And so you should have and so where it would slide is if it's a B2C purchase, it's usually less than $100. But again, it's something you want it to be a dollar amount that people could spend on an impulse, and nobody will ever hold them accountable for how that money is spent.
Yeah, no one wants to be the Steve. You remember how you spent like that 5,000 that one time? You saw we're not going your way anymore.
It's, it's funny because at my old corporate job, like you said, 474, I could spend that on a credit card, no questions asked. We
Yeah.
hit over 500. Okay, well, we need 3 bids. And I'm like, wait, wait,
Yeah.
what?
It's a
Okay,
trigger, huh?
yeah. So, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for that $500, they get a fancy binder. And obviously, we're not making it. It costs us $100 to put one of these binders in somebody's hands. But it's through a fulfillment center. I mean, that's just for the production of the binder.
Yeah,
Production, shipping. Productions. I think this binder was like $65 to produce, and then another 35 to ship. And and so our goal isn't, we're not out to make money, on that. And that's but the interesting thing is I found that this speeds up sales. And I had a mentor years ago who said the best way to speed up a sale is to slow it down. And and so this is kind of a way of playing that out. Ultimately, typically we make our money by being in retainer relationships with clients. And so when we first start working with them, we don't say the R word. We just focus on figuring out, presenting this. And like I said, it's not that we're selling it. It's more of, we just try to create an environment where somebody wants to buy. And if we create that environment and they don't want to buy, we've just accepted that either they weren't serious, or they weren't ready, or they're just not our customer. And that's fine.
It keeps racing through my head. Yeah, so if we're trying to encourage the sale when there's already mental friction in the person's head, we're creating more mental friction. They're slowing down the sale now, going, whoa, wait a minute, hold on a second. They need to get through that time to think. So by backing off and giving them more time than they're expecting, I'm like, okay, hey, but we're still here. And then making it an easy sign off. Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really smart.
Yeah. And here's the thing. When you feel that internal pressure to close, you can't hide it. Your body language communicates it. And there are a few things in this world that we hate, that people hate more than being sold.
Yeah.
yeah,
And so this process, I mean, I really, if somebody says no to our first time offer, we're just as happy as the times people say yes. Because we figure that no, it's funny. There was one time I questioned if we got it right. We had it was a former client that had left a company we had been working for and went to a new company, and we'd done a good job. We did a very good job for him. In 18 months, we took him from 18 million to 60 million in revenue. And
Wow.
And so he left that company and he went to another company. He said, "Hey, you want to come help us out?" And I said, "Sure." And so we got together. And during that, when I'd worked with him originally, I'd done the usual thing. Well, hey, let's sign a 12-month deal, and here's our retainer, and let's all cross our fingers and hope this works out. And and since that time, I moved away from that strategy. And I remember having lunch with him and his boss, and he said, "Can you give us a proposal?" I said, No, we're going to do this little mini project first. He's like, "Well, can you make that mini project part of the proposal?" I said, "No." I said, "We're not going to do that." And I said, "One, I don't know how we can accurately tell you what you need until we get through this little mini project, because that's going to help us figure out what you do and do not need." And it was funny. He left, and his head was a little bit down, and they never took the mini project. And I thought, wow, maybe I missed this, because this was a former client that we'd been very successful for, who was actively petitioning. And I saw him about 6 months later, and I said, "Hey, Chris, what happened there?" And he said, "Well, the president of the company had a friend that had a marketing agency, and we ended up going with him." And so that was the closest I ever felt to maybe we messed up by letting this deal get away. But then I find out
Yeah.
I would have done all that work, put together proposals, and was still going to the buddy of
Yeah.
the president of the company.
Man. Yeah. I can't beat that one.
No, that's just frustrating.
Yeah.
So I have a question going back as well. Like, so you're designing the chips in cell phones, and then you're marketing during the mobile revolution.
Yeah.
What's going through your head, because we're all trying to learn to interact on these devices, and you were working on the predecessor chips and know the thinking of those teams. Like,
Here's something funny. So back when I was still designing cell phones, I worked for Ericsson, which at the time was one of the 3 largest mobile phone makers in the world. And one of the times I was over in Sweden, I was walking through the office on the weekend, and I saw a bunch of Swedes huddled over a lab bench. And the one thing I learned was, when you saw Swedes working on the weekend, go figure out what they're doing. It's important. And because they're never in there on the weekend. And so I go over, and I knew one of the guys. He was project leader. His name was Lars Nord. I said, "Hey, Lars, what are you working on?" And he said, "Oh, it's this new wireless standard. It's going to transfer data back and forth." And I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about it." He said, "Well, there's a consortium. It's made up of Ericsson, Nokia, IBM, Toshiba, and Intel. And we're working together to create this standard. And this is the very first radio of this standard. And we're getting ready to fly back to the United States to show this radio to the consortium." What I saw was the very first Bluetooth radio.
Wow.
And I saw it before the consortium that was helping build it. So I'm like one of the very first people in the world to see a working Bluetooth radio.
That is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the time I just thought, okay, another wireless standard. I had no idea it would be in absolutely everything we have.
Yeah, that's just got to be a moment you're walking back and going, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah, I'm looking at everything on my desk that has Bluetooth, being like, oh wow,
yeah.
every device.
But it's funny. A lot of it you just kind of take for granted. You get in it, you get in the middle of it, and you just don't think about it. You're like, back when people still hadn't gotten their first cell phone, I had like 4 or 5 working phones at any time. I had different colors. It was just, I grabbed whatever the phone that had the plastics that were in the mood I was in, and you just don't think about it. That's just normal. Reach in the drawer. I'll take this phone today, and so in many ways it was really neat. And with a lot of technologies that bring along a lot of good things, we often take the good things and we push them too far until they become bad. The one thing that didn't feel great was contributing to this culture where you go to a restaurant and you see a family at the table and they're all sitting there like this, and nobody's talking, and they're all they all have their heads in their phones. Not fun knowing that I contributed to that, but I'm sure what happened with or without me. But it's interesting. I mean, I remember in school Two things my professors told me. They said at some point in the future, calls will be free. Now they weren't right about that. They weren't strictly right, but they were very, very close. I mean, when's the last time somebody paid a long distance charge? It's that's gone away. I mean, it used to be if you called into the next county, you would think twice because you'd have a long distance charge.
Yeah, I
And
didn't always have to dial the area code either. I remember I'm dating myself too, and uh, yeah,
and the other thing they told us is in the future you won't be calling a number, you'll be calling a person. And we're not fully there, but we're largely there. I mean, gone are the days where you're memorizing like 20 key phone numbers in your life.
Yeah, I can't even tell you my dad's number, and he's
so
had the
wait,
same number for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I now remember 4 phone numbers. Uh,
Yeah.
a month ago, that was 3. My phone number, my wife's, which is 1 digit off of mine, and 911. And now there's a 988 for mental health crisis. I
Yeah.
remember that one because I don't need to. We've got this is the amazing things about these. Like we have a mobile computing device, right? I don't need to remember all that stuff. I just tap it in my phone. And
Yeah. Let me
I
close
mean,
the door. I'll be right.
yeah.
Yeah. We got the dog barking.
the the extortion happened in case he went dancing again.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh no. I mean, I remember like the Living Daylights with Timothy Dalton, like Bond in the '80s. Like his first scene, he like does this. There's he jumps off. There's a fight, like a bunch of people, and then I don't remember exactly how it worked out. And then he goes off it winds up in a boat in the middle of the ocean, and he's got a like, cell phone, I think, or a satellite phone. I think that was like big bulky thing. And then then the future of mobile was pagers with Doogie Howser later on. So like, man, yeah, you have to watch out for the people face down in their phone, but I'll take this over those any day.
Yeah.
Um,
Man, pagers.
oh yeah,
I had a pager.
I didn't have a pager. That was something I was ascertaining. I was going to do. I was going to get one someday, and then
So here's a lesson, and I saw this early on. And this really made an impact on me. So back in the late '90s, Motorola was strongly number one. But right in the last part of the '90s, they started switching over to digital phones, and Motorola didn't have a great digital solution. And so it was kind of between Nokia and Ericsson. And Ericsson had a really slick phone that was actually in a James Bond movie. And if you want to dance, I actually have one sitting over 10 feet from my desk. But it was a phone. It was a beautiful phone. It was tiny. It was lightweight, and it was placed in a James Bond movie. And turned out that both Nokia and Ericsson had chips sourced out of a Philips fab in New Mexico. And one day the fab burned down. And the same day that the fab burned down, Nokia got a phone call from Philips saying, "Hey, Nokia, this is Philips. We got bad news. Our fab just burned down. What do you want to do?" And Nokia said, "Thank you so much for calling. We want you to put together a team. We'll be there in 2 days. Here's who we want to have in the room. Here's the information we want to have." And so Nokia flew over, sat down with Philips, and they worked out a plan to cover all their capacity. Now, they used up all of Philips' remaining capacity worldwide. And they said, "This is still not enough. We want you to license the design of one of your competitors. We will pay you for that, but we want you to license the design of one of your competitors because we need that capacity." And Philips agreed. And so they got all that ironed out in about 2 weeks. Now, about 2 weeks after that fire happened, Ericsson goes down to the shipping dock and notices there's no parts there. And they get upset and they call up Philips. "You dirty dogs, what's going on? Where are our parts?" And Philips says, "Oh, we've been meaning to call you. we had a fire and it burned down the fab. And Ericsson's like, well, we need capacity. And they said, well, we don't really have any capacity. And so that was the time that Nokia pulled ahead and became number one. And it's hard to imagine now because they've been out of the game so long, but there was a time where one out of every two phones shipped in the world was a Nokia phone. I mean, massive, massive market share. And Ericsson's phone was really good. It was, Nokia had some strengths with their phone. Ericsson's was pretty neat as well. Had different strengths. But the fact that Ericsson couldn't flood the market with those phones facilitated Nokia leaping forward to number one. And when I left Ericsson, and they actually had vendor training, and they basically, for lack of a better phrase, they taught us how to abuse the vendors. And they even had us doing role playing where we would abuse the vendors, stopping just short from having a paddle and so when I left Ericsson, I went to a chip maker. It was called RF Micro Devices. Their number one customer was Nokia. And I started learning how Nokia did business. And Nokia was tough, without a doubt. They were tough. But the one thing that you knew when you worked with Nokia is they were interested in your success. And they would come in and they did something that was just unheard of. And that was, for you to ship parts to Nokia, you had to open up everything. You had to open up your cost models and everything. And they would sit there and they'd look at your supply chain. And if they said, you know what, we think you're paying too much for this element in your supply chain. Here's what we want you to do. And they would coach you to make your supply chain both more robust and cheaper. And even though they knew our cost models, their view was, we have market prices for all these parts. We pay a little bit less because we're Nokia, we're the biggest, but we will pay you this. And so we had products that, sure enough, we only had like 30 to 35% gross margins. And that actually worried Nokia. Those were the ones they were focused on, not to drive the price down. They were like, this is the price it has to be. But they were working with us to try to figure out how we could reduce our costs because they wanted us to be profitable. But at the same time that we had those parts shipping at 30 to 35% gross margins, we had other parts that we were shipping at 70% gross margins to Nokia. And they knew it because that was the market, that was the market price minus the discount that they wanted. And so it was a relationship where I looked at it, I was like, they knew that you wanted them to, that if you were supplying to Nokia, you knew that Nokia wanted you to succeed, and they would coach you to make sure you did succeed. And it didn't mean that they didn't have high expectations. Any tier one, customer will. But that's the reason Philips got the phone call the day the fab burned down. And it's the same reason Ericsson didn't get a phone call.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's powerful. No,
Wow.
that's a life lesson right there.
Yeah. I'm like, man,
Market
I
dominance
gotta.
just by being a nice, by caring about the relationship.
Yeah, because they basically cared enough to make sure that you didn't fail. Because it helped them, because now you're never going to go out of business. So I don't have to worry about my supply chains.
Yeah.
And as a business, you get to grow too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And there was a time when there was a Nokia phone, there were 1 million phones a day shipping out of a Nokia factory. Every day, 1 million phones leaving the factory. And for you to have that type of supply chain, you have to have suppliers that you can count on.
1 million. Jeez.
My first was the Nokia brick.
Yeah.
That had Snake. Favorite game ever.
Yeah.
I had Razor. That was probably a little bit later. I don't know.
Yeah, that was later.
Yeah. Yeah, they've brought that back. They brought that back in a Android version.
Huh. I I didn't get into a cell phone for a long time. I was like, it sounds backwards, but I was like, landline works perfectly fine. I don't want something. I was worried about the reliability of a. I was like, I'm gonna have to have a landline regardless because of reliability. So why pay for both?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't even know if my kids know what a landline is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
explaining to my kids now is I don't want to go too far down this. I mean, it's like we actually had to have a little box to have a voicemail, and then you had to pay for an extra service to make sure that that could be recorded. Because when I was young, we had if we left the house and we didn't have that service, because I didn't when I was a kid, I got that when I got my first apartment. I knew that if I missed a call, if the call didn't come in I was expecting, it was because I wasn't there. At least I was convinced of that. If it was going to be a job that was supposed to call me back, or if it was going to be a girl, I wasn't leaving until I got that call. Or if I did, I was like, "This is it. I'm going to miss the call." I get back, I'm like, ah. And of course, sometimes it would still come in, but that was the psychology at the time. The freedom of being able to have a voicemail alone was like, wow.
Yeah. 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 It's amazing. It was interesting. At least when I was in it, it was the largest consumer market in history. There was no other consumer product that had shipped that volume of anything. And it was wild. It was fun. It was an interesting time. And it but it yeah, like I said, it changed. It changed, and the margins eroded away, and you know, and it's a bloodbath. It's tough. I mean, even it's funny. The cost of phones have gone up considerably in the last few years. But even when you think about what's in them, it's amazing. The functionality that they pack in those small devices.
It really is.
Yeah, like their relative cost to what you're getting has been going down forever,
Yeah,
just massively. I mean, because you're getting, I mean, the amount of memory, the computing power, the capabilities that they're packing in, are just the cameras are just paying less and less and less every year, even with inflation, and with that, and technology is deflationary, right? It's just amazing when we look at what we can. We got 5G towers popping up, and yeah, I mean, you talk about like AOL at one point, either either owned or they were contracting out. I think it was 100% of the CD manufacturing of the world for just like short period of time, because they were sending. Remember, the AOL was the coaster of the late '90s, right?
yeah, yeah,
Everybody had a free AOL disk.
yeah.
That's when AOL Instant Messenger went sunsetted a couple years ago, but I remember many work conversations like then and yeah, just yeah.
You know, I I moved back. So I was living in Japan up until June of 1991. And I moved back to the U.S. and immediately went to university. And we go in there, and they introduce us to this thing called email. And I'm like, well, this is kind of interesting. And I had, I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time, and my brother-in-law was down in Houston. And I realized I could send him an email and it would arrive instantly. And I remember looking at the timestamps, trying to figure out. I was like, no, they have to put a delay in here. There's no way this could be instant. And as soon as I figured out there was no delay, I was like, oh, the phone companies are going to hate this. Now realize I had just flown back from Japan, where I was paying $1 a minute to call back to the United States. And
Wow.
yeah, and I saw this thing. I'm like, this is bizarre. This is gonna instant communications and it's free. It's like, was like, oh, the phone. And I thought for certain the phone companies would find some way to put a stop to that because it was just too disruptive. And so the other thing, so we were using these little Unix terminals, and we had to learn different commands. And there's this Unix command called finger, which you could type finger and then somebody's handle, and it would say what computer they were on, how long they've been there, so you could hunt down your buddies while you're looking for that. And so I thought, well, let me try this with my brother-in-law. So I send this command. He's working, he's not working for the university. He's working for a private company. And I'm able to see exactly when my brother-in-law is at the desk and when he's not at the desk.
Wow.
And then one day I try it and it's blocked. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I tried fingering you the other day and it was blocked. He said, yeah, it turns out you set off some security alarms. So I was unintentionally a very early hacker. I didn't know I was at the time, but
you helped create the industry of security, of cybersecurity.
That just shows how the people who made the internet, they certainly had no idea how it could be exploited, but they just had no mind towards security. I mean, things were just wide open.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
just making sure that one base could communicate and make sure that they survived, and at least some chain of the command survived a nuclear fallout. All right.
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine you think of mutually assured destruction leading to one of the most explosive sorry, pardon the pun, explosive technologies mankind has ever developed. Now we have as much as writing, was so massive because I could retain information generationally instead of just passing down stories. Now I can instantly communicate with anyone around the world, and it all starts with the idea that we could all be blown up.
Yeah. It's bizarre how that started. Well, do you know? So a story most people don't realize about GE. So, and again, this is dating myself, but GE used to have this little jingle: GE, we bring good things to life.
Think.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago. Like I said, dating myself. Well, so the irony is the General Electric Company was started by Thomas Edison. And way back in the day, there was a fight between Edison and Westinghouse whether the country would make an electrical grid of alternating current, which was Westinghouse's favored current, versus direct current, which was Edison's favorite current. And Edison was losing the battle, and so he decided to do a demonstration to show people how dangerous alternating current was. And so he did these little experiments, or he did these little demonstrations where he would take animals and he would hook them to direct current, and the animals were fine. And he'd hook them to alternating current, and it killed the animal. And he's like, see how dangerous this is? We can't go and use alternating current. Well, somebody saw one of these demonstrations and they said, hey, could you make a chair with electrodes where we have prisoners sit in the chair and we use it to kill them? And so Thomas Edison made the original electric chair as a part of General Electric, which later went on to have a jingles, slogan saying we bring good things to life.
Wow. Wow.
Someone in marketing has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
A morbid one.
Yeah.
That's that is hilarious. Wow.
Yeah, it's but I mean, I think that's your point. It's just, we create these technologies, and I would imagine very, very few creators of the technology ever had the vision for how it would be fully used. And it's just funny, these paths that we go along. And it'd be interesting to see what where AI goes. I know, Kevin, you and I have had a bunch of discussions about that. Um, my favorite AI story is still when Microsoft gave a bot a Twitter account and spun up Tay, and 24 hours later they had to shut it down and issue an apology because Tay was tweeting out these just horrible tweets about how he liked Hitler and some very, very off-color sexual statements. So in 24 hours, the trolls had gone in and essentially programmed Tay to become a Hitler-loving sex bot.
Don't feed the trolls.
Yeah.
Man, let's see. Yeah, I think like the one some of the AI that is going right now, text to image generation ones, text to video
Hmm.
is or well, text to image is the one that I'm seeing right now with like stable diffusion, mid journey, and there's another one that I'm hearing about. Basically, a lot of the big tech companies, a number of them, they're creating these. I mean, there's databases of at least billions of images, and now there's companies that are making like AI, and much of it's open source code that can go in, pull this. You do a search or using a search kind of function saying this is what I want, and then you can put in some extra qualifiers. Hey, maybe there's an artist name and high contrast, vibrant colors, something, whatever, maybe a style, and then tell it to go, and then it takes these images and it runs it through the AI and creates an image that has never existed before. You still are responsible if you use that. Um, so, and then you had America's Got Talent in the last sometime in the last few weeks. Um, yeah, they did. There was a they did someone on camera. They were on stage, and then there was a camera, so you could see the screen of them. And then the actual person singing, and the one above was a deep fake. It was Simon Cowell's face, a little bit younger Simon Cowell, I think, like overlaid on him. So it looked like slightly younger Simon Cowell who was singing on the screen above. Um, and uh, that's where we've gotten, where it's openly accessible kind of stuff. I don't think this gets rid of people, because like if you're an artist, yeah, I can create a bunch, and some of it still needs some more work, and it takes like skill to get. I've got to figure out the right kind of searches and the right way to work with the AI. But an artist knows what good looks like.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? Me, I'm trying to create. Oh no, that's good. Someone else could come on. Like, yeah, it could be better. Oh. I made stick figures want to be erased. So when I was a kid, so
Yeah.
that was my artistic level. Anyways, that's
Yeah.
that's just a taste of some of the AI that's coming along. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Casey, you want to start off the questions?
Oh yeah. See, you tricked me. Hey, you want to ask him your question while I pull up my list of
It's
questions?
Casey's been checking out the free gifts while we've been sitting here talking.
I may or may not have been signed up, already logged in, and created my account for my 10-day learning platform.
See, this is Casey gets in and does all kinds of shit that I don't do, and this is where like there's a lot of stuff that like we've been counterparts for a long time. A lot of these things,
Yeah.
um, suddenly like, hey Casey, you know how this works? Have you heard about this? Suddenly, like a week later, I I've got something to show you. Like what? I'm gonna send you a spreadsheet. Just do you have a few minutes? Okay. What the hell did you do? What is all of this?
I may just like dive headfirst into stuff.
Yeah.
Close
Within a
my eyes
month
and
and a
dive.
half, there's spreadsheets creating spreadsheets with bots creating stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
um,
All right.
oh,
So,
oh,
questions.
the question, right?
Yeah.
The So, who stole the cookie from the cookie jar? And why did you think you would get away with it?
So the way it works out for me is I think the last cookie I had, my wife, who saved my life last year, came up to me and said, "You ate the last cookie." I was like, "Yep, you got to do more than save my life to get that last cookie."
So you just didn't care. It's beautiful. Just, yep, right here. I'm not hiding this. Brazen.
Yeah.
All right, Casey.
All right, so I have like a list of questions, and I normally just pick them randomly. We're going to start off with some easier ones, and then we're going to end with a couple that would probably relate to your COVID experience. So, what is your favorite book?
I'm going to answer that with two books because they have one serves one purpose and one serves that's very important. The other serves a different purpose. So, and it's funny, I read them the same year, and those were the two best books I read that year. One book is called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's a book about negotiating. He used to be the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. But if you use the advice he has in that book, all of your relationships will improve. And it's really, the key, it's kind of a recurring message is if you want to persuade people, the first thing you need to do is convince them that you understand what they're feeling. And you won't be able to persuade them otherwise until you do. And I've used some of the principles in that in ways that just mind-blowingly effective. I was in a client meeting. We were meeting with the sales team, and we were trying to see if they would try some different things on some of the leads that were coming in. And the meeting just went south. It just went incredibly south, and it was so bad. I was getting ready to end the meeting because nobody was benefiting from this meeting. And I thought, let me try one of those things Chris Voss talked about. And so I looked at the person sitting across the table and I said, "It seems like you think that I came here today to critique you guys." And the salesperson, which I guarantee 100%, that's exactly what they were feeling. And the salesperson started saying, no, not at all. And starts making the case for me being in the room, having the conversation that I'm having. And I mean, it like completely turned the meeting around in 90 seconds. And it's one of those things that's just hard to believe until you see it in action. So that's from one book. The other book that I read the same year is a book by Nate Staniforth. He's a professional magician. He is one of 31 people that Penn and Teller follows on Twitter. And that book is called Here's Real Magic. And it's about discovering wonder and magic in everyday life.
Okay.
Yeah. What was that second book name?
Here is Real Magic.
Here's Real Magic.
And it's brilliantly well written. It's the first book Nate ever published. And I mean, he didn't have a ghostwriter. He wrote it himself. And he is an amazing, amazing writer. Keeps you engaged. It's shocking that he writes so well. And by the way, if you want to get a taste of Nate Staniforth, if you go on YouTube and look up Nate Staniforth lottery illusion, you will see one of the most mind-blowing illusions you've ever seen. And the only ones I've seen that blow my mind more than that was when I was in a room with Nate with a small audience of about, I don't know, 40 or 50 people. And some of the illusions he did, the easiest answer to what he did was it was supernatural, but he made it all clear all along these were just illusions. He's a brilliant magician.
Wow. Okay. Are you finding that one, Kevin?
Yeah,
Okay.
Staniforth, Staniforth.
Yes.
Yep, yeah, got it.
All right. I'm expecting you to send me that one. All right. Let's do one more that's fun. When you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, let me go way back. Um, I I ran away from home when I was 6 years old, and my plan was I was going to go out and live in the woods and become a hairy man.
Look at
At 6 years old, okay.
yeah. There's no arguing that.
Yeah.
That seems like a legit reason to me.
No kidding, right?
All right.
Was
Let's.
Grizzly Adams was that on then?
Yeah, I
Scream.
think so. I think so. Yeah. But yeah, I was going to live in the woods and become a hairy man.
All right. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Huh. I think it's funny. I've lived in Texas for 18 years, and I think that would still be my answer. I really, really, really like Texas, and the and I've lived a few places around the world. I've lived in Europe. I've lived a couple different places in Asia, and um, and they were good. They were fascinating. But I think I'd live here in Texas. I might live, maybe an hour west of Austin, a little more into the hill country, but I'd probably still be Texas.
Okay. All right. So here's where we're going to start turning. What's one thing you have not gotten to in your life that, if you do not get to, will be a massive regret?
Hmm. I let me change that a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, I used to live in Japan, and I would love to take my wife to Japan and get her outside of Tokyo and show her some of the parts of Japan that I saw that were beautiful. The people were fascinating. Um, it was a very, very rich experience in my life, and so the regret that I would have is missing the opportunity to let my wife see some of the things I saw when I lived over there.
Okay.
That sounds amazing.
And then last question. How do you want to be remembered?
Huh. Wow. You'd think after the last year I'd have a quick answer to that. Um, huh. Um, and actually, I think I do have an answer to that. The When I woke up last year, just knowing that impacted lives and that would be missed.
You definitely impacted lives, Craig. Tremendous character. And
I'm a little sad that it's taken me to today for you to impact my life.
Wow, that's very generous.
I mean, this has been a great call. I've learned a lot of things that I need to do, and at least one course that I have to go through. So maybe many more.
Yeah.
yeah, I gotta go to Japan.
I know. I'm like, I don't know what you've seen over there, but I need to go over there now.
I mean, you've worked on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please finish your thought.
I mean, you've worked on designing the chips that I think about. And yeah, I mean, just a whole bunch of like life experiences. I've never been outside the United States. Been outside the contiguous 48 once. That's it. So just there's a lot of like. I don't want to have a life and death experience again, but
Yeah.
having that that's yeah, a lot of like journeys to go through. It's fantastic stuff, and yeah, you've got tremendous character. Um, anyone that knows you is better for it.
That's very generous, Kevin. Thank you.
All right.
If you do get a chance to go to Japan, what so many people do is they spend a lot of time in Tokyo. I would spend like 2 days in Tokyo. Go see the palace. Go do Tokyo Tower or something like that. Get out of Tokyo. And if I had limited time, I would spend more days in Hiroshima than I would in Tokyo. It's more beautiful in Hiroshima. It's more historic. It's just a very, very neat place, and and it's you go in there. I've been the museums in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and you just see things, and it makes the reality of nuclear warfare very, very real. And you see pictures. The big difference with Nagasaki is they have color photographs in the museum as opposed to Hiroshima. It's only black and white photographs. And when you see those color photographs, and I won't describe them, but it leaves an impression. And it definitely makes you think about hard and complex choices.
Yeah, it's unsettling, but I think it's good for people to recognize those possibilities can happen. It's something we always want to step back from. That's, but yeah, I'd love to go over there and experience like the culture and the sites and um,
Yeah.
uh,
Same for me. Like, there's a couple countries I want to hit up. Just, like, since I was probably 10 or 11, I've wanted to go to Brazil.
Really?
Yeah.
What fascinates you about Brazil?
The Amazon rainforest.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even care about like all the major cities. I just would like to go to the rainforest and see it. Uh, I don't know. Okay, I take that back. The one city I want to go to, I can't even remember, is the statue of
Rio de
Jesus.
Janeiro.
Yeah, I would like to go see that, just because it's such a massive statue. That's just it's fascinating on so many levels. But the whole rainforest, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also like wife and I hit cruises, and my fun time on it is hitting the excursions to see like Mayan ruins. So
Wow.
like
oh
I
wow,
like that type of stuff. But
Machu Picchu is that?
yeah. All right. I think we've covered everything we could possibly cover. We've definitely kept you here over an hour.
Yeah.
That's all right. This has been great. And it's great meeting you, Casey. And, and let me just reiterate, if somebody wants those two free resources, the URL I made is alliesforme.com, and it's number 4 /Sith, for Sith marketing.
Yep. And we'll
And
get that. I'll update the deal, and I've posted everything to LinkedIn and YouTube. Well, LinkedIn and Facebook, and YouTube will be updated shortly.
I can vouch for Craig. Every time he talks to me about the process, it like blows my mind. The thought that goes into it, the psychology behind it, and everything. You're like, this is what people do, and they're like, yeah, that's me. Yep, I'm one of the. Hey, this is why people do that, and they do this, and this is what they're thinking. Yeah, yeah, okay, that's exactly every time.
yeah. What's funny is, here's kind of a quick story. Of course, we study the way people make choices, and we think, as marketers, we often think about scarcity and how scarcity drives decisions. So years ago, I was at a conference, and I had a little booth at the conference, and at one point, somebody rolled this cooler of ice cream out in the middle of the floor, and people were grabbing ice cream out of the booth, or out of the cooler. And it's probably 20 feet away from me, and I'm watching this for about 45 minutes. But I have people visiting me in the booth, and I'm going to engage with the people, but I'm thinking about ice cream for 45 minutes. And I figured out that they had two types of ice cream. One was a drumstick, and the other was a Nestle Crunch bar ice cream. And I decided, when I get my chance, I'm going to go over there and get one of those drumsticks. And so finally, people were done visiting the booth. I head over to the cooler. I reach in to get my drumstick, and I notice there is one Nestle Crunch bar left. My hand moves, reaches away from the drumstick for the Nestle Crunch bar. As I'm doing it, I'm like, Craig, you're only doing this because it's the last one. And I'm like, yes, it is. And it's mine. And and
I wouldn't argue that at all. I would be grabbing that last one too.
And it's just funny. I mean, even when you know how these different mechanisms work and you see yourself falling to them, you're like, yep, that's why I'm doing it, but I'm still doing it.
It tasted even better that way, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, well, anyway, this has been really good. It's great meeting you guys, and I appreciate you having me on. And this has been fun.
Thank you so much, Craig. All right. Night, everybody.
All right. Good night.